Clear prop.
Tower 73, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final. Clear passenger. 1 Charlie Bravo, makes straight in runway 25, join 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I am fantastic as always. This week, one of our listeners named Holly, I believe she's in the northeast part of the United States, sent me a couple of guests that we had to reach out to. It's taken a couple weeks to coordinate the schedules, but we have Tammy Barlette with us on the show today, and she's got all kinds of great stuff to share with you. Tammy, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Holly. I appreciate that.
So Holly said she took your course. I'm excited to learn more about it. I've read a lot of it on the internet and done my own level of research, and we've had a lot of good prep conversation before we started recording the show today. Tammy, I'm excited. I think I'm a high performer, but I can always get better. At a high level, part of the intro here, why do people need high level, or do they need performance training in general? What do they need that maybe we don't know we need?
Well, honestly, most people spend a lot of time focused on their skill set. And sometimes when we get under extreme pressure, the access to that knowledge and the skill set is not as available as we'd like it to be. And it requires us to do mental performance training really to have better access to that. And when you're flying, that's vital, right? Because you can't just pull over in a cloud. You have to keep your mind in the game, and you can't give up. So it's extremely important in aviation.
So give us some history and background. Tell us, like, where did you come from? How do you have these skills? And what makes you the performance coach that we all need to talk to as it relates to aviation? Give us a little bit of the aviation background for Tammy Barlette.
Well, I grew up in Minnesota, and I went through an ROTC program at the University of Minnesota and decided that I wanted to become a pilot. So I went to pilot training down in Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas. And my first assignment right out of pilot training was as a T-37 instructor pilot. And it wasn't necessarily the assignment I wanted, but it was the perfect assignment for me. I learned that I really, really love teaching, and I really like seeing positive change in people's lives and helping them become better. And so it couldn't have been a better job for me. Once that job was over, I got selected to fly the A-10 Warthog, a single-seat attack aircraft that's literally built around a 20-foot gun. And I went to training in Tucson. Then I flew it in Korea and came back to Tucson. Then I had to have cervical spine reconstruction from an aircraft injury. So I went into fly the unmanned platforms. So a lot of people call them drones. So the Predator and the Reaper. I went and flew full-time for the Guard for 6.5 years, flying the Predator. And I also went to weapons school in that platform. So the Air Force's version of Top Gun, which is also where I flew the Reaper, which is the larger version of the unmanned platform. And I was flying combat missions the whole entire time I was in that platform because we were in OEF, OIF at that time. And then I wanted to get back to teaching in the high G environment. And so I got an exception to policy for my spine, the surgery I had, and I went back to Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas. And I was a T-38 instructor, which is a tandem 2-seat fighter trainer. Did that full-time in the reserves for 6.5 years. And that's really where I developed a lot of content I teach now, because I learned that the mind piece of aviation is so extremely important. And I spent a lot of time teaching that in order to get the students to really perform better. I'd focused on getting their head out of their own way before they would fly the aircraft, because it was getting in their way a lot. Yep. And then I retired. I went into professional speaking, and I still do that. But as I was speaking, I developed a program that's a 4-module program that's mental performance training for aviators specifically. So it's the same content that elite athletes use, mental performance training techniques and tools to be at their absolute best. And I took that and translated into the aircraft, into the aviation world. And I focus mostly on GA and airline pilots, commercial, whoever really needs this. And it's truly everyone, but I just want to make it clear that a lot of people think I focus on the military because I'm prior military, but my actual focus is civilian aviation.
Yeah, I think Wally and I can both relate tremendously. Wally, how many of your applicants have less knowledge or knowledge problems or performance problems? Where would you rate those scales of that balance, I guess?
Yeah, I would say that the probably 60% of the people who have performance problems, they're not knowledge problems. I think
Yeah.
a couple of shows ago we gave an example of a young man. We talked about basic VFR weather minimums, and in the ground portion, yeah, he knew it. He knew it cold, and he gave me the answers. And came time to go fly, and I said, "Okay, are we good to go?" He goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, we're good to go." And I'm looking at the weather, and I said, "Well, how's the weather?" He said, "Oh, we should be good. It's 800 broken." Okay, I says, "We're trying to get a private pilot certificate here, and it's below basic BFR weather minimums outside." And there was no correlation. Where an
Mm.
hour ago he had answered the question, but when it came time to apply that knowledge, he struggled with it.
Yeah, I guess, Tammy, that's a great backgrounder question too. Like, is that bigger problem that you see? I mean, I think I see more in a flight school owner. I see people who come in and they read the PHAC and the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, and they kind of know the general topics. But the second you ask them to do something, they kind of freeze up, right? Is that the performance anxiety? I get it in golf. I'm the shot I see is perfect. The execution is normally a lot less perfect than that. Is that the performance type stuff that aviators that take your course get better at?
Absolutely. That's one of the things we focus on is accessing that content. If you can picture an arena full of people and, the concert's over and they open 2 sets of doors, like, it's gonna take forever to get all those people out, right? And that's the kinda thing that happens to people's brains a lot of times is when they're under stress, there's only 2 doors open, and maybe the knowledge they need is way in the back of the arena. So you gotta learn how to open all the doors so you can get to that content quicker. And that's the key. People don't think about that all the time. They think, "Oh, I know it. I can tell you it." But then they get under pressure and something just locks up. And that's actually a trainable skill that you can work on, but you have to know how to decrease that anxiety and keep that access to that content that's inside your own brain.
And I think the one thing I fight the most at the flight school is everyone thinks flight training is about flight hours. If I if I could just fly more, I'd be better, and they wanna fly more, and they wanna go and they don't believe me, they think I'm lying, and I'm really trying to save them both money and time and effort, but to go to the practice area to do steep turns or whatever the maneuver might be, and you haven't even read the maneuvers guide, that's gonna be the most expensive, worthless lesson, and I'm sure you had many aviators in the military and people that you've met since the military that thought they were doing good by doing the skill of turning the yoke or the stick, but they weren't getting anything from it. If I could stop that for my students, I think I would be the best flight school owner in the world, and I try, but no one believes me. They just think, "Give me a 4th lesson this week, that's all I need." And they build 100 hours and they don't have a private pilot certificate, but they don't realize they're not even accessing that performance skill that they need. They have the knowledge, they know
Yeah.
what the rules are, the weather minimums, they know I can't lose 100 feet in steep turns, but they can't do the actual work under pressure when Wally's sitting next to him. Wally's not an overbearing person, but it's the fact that he's a DPE and holds that paper in his hands that's gonna make them a pilot.
Right.
Why were you able to do this? What's the how of Tammy's story? I mean, if you did it, other people can do it. What's your how?
Well, there's a lot of parts moving in this that have to come together, right? It's not just like I like to say it's a lot of simple things. When I tell people one technique, they're like, "Oh, I don't need your class. That's so simple." Well, right. Everything I teach is very, very simple. You have to put it all together and you have to actually use it. And one of the biggest things, the one thing that popped into my mind when you were mentioning that is aviation attracts a lot of perfectionists. And perfectionism is not conducive to aviation. I mean, you can use the simple example of if you have a student in your a student even knows that if you told them to hold exactly the airspeed the entire time, one airspeed, like, that's crazy. But some people are still attempting to try and be perfect. That's why we give them parameters, right? So you give them a plus or minus airspeed, a plus or minus altitude, and a plus or minus bank maybe when you're doing that steep turn. So there's not so much pressure to be perfect, because now if they're trying to be perfect in one area, their cross-check or their instrument scan, as other people say, is not going to be as good, and they're not going to be able to keep all those things in check. So they're trying to be this perfectionist. We have to understand that deviations and even, unfortunately, failure sometimes is part of aviation. And I always used to tell my students, the only difference between you, like there's no perfect flight, and the only difference between you and me is how many mistakes you make and how big they are. I make them too. And when I make them, I would show them how do I handle it with the aircraft, as well as how am I handling it mentally? What am I doing with the mistake? Am I going to beat myself up and define myself by the error? Or am I going to go, well, that's interesting. That's some feedback for me next time I do this. So it needs to inform you, not define you.
So we've had a number of professional female pilots on the show. We've probably had more professional male pilots on the show, because it's obviously an imbalance a little bit. You've been doing this for a long time. How did you get into it? How did you maintain it? How did you have a family and do all this? That couldn't have been easy. Can people handle more than they think they can handle?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because one of the things I think the military taught me, and for me, military and aviation go hand in hand because that's where I learned to fly. But one of the things the military and aviation taught me is that we can do so much more than we thought, or we think, proper English. Because, when you get into the military, you can't just quit. You have to keep going. And so you find a way and you realize that you can do so much more than you think. Now, the problem is, let's say you're sitting there listening to this and you're not in the military and you can quit. Then you have to absorb that mentality yourself. Meaning, I like to say, if you have set a goal and it is, it's in alignment with your personal core values, it's not your dad's dream, it's not something you're doing because it's cool, but you really want to do this, then set the goal, say, this is my goal. And once you set yourself down the path, quitting is not an option. You got to adopt that mentality of, I will fail out before I ever pull those handles and bail out. So I will go until failure, and you'd be surprised at how much you can accomplish. So this is the other thing. When you adopt a no-quit mentality, you don't waste mental energy on, should I quit? What do I look like if it quits? What are people going to say if I quit? Because if you start going down that maybe I should quit path, it's probably because you're in a challenging spot on this journey. And that's the time and place on this journey where you need all of your mental energy. You don't need to be letting some of it seep out going, well, maybe I should quit. You're just going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. So did I have those thoughts? Absolutely. It's what you do with your thoughts that counts. I like to say that's important in what I teach. I like to tell people it's not that, I don't have these thoughts. It's what you do with them. So I would go, okay, I acknowledge you. Hey, I want to quit thought, but you can go acknowledge, dismiss. Like I have a goal and I'm going to run towards failure. And it looks like I'm going to jump off a cliff, but guess what? The road usually turns 90 degrees right and it's amazing. So don't give up on yourself. Like that's like the foundation of where I come from and what I've done.
Well, from what I've read and what I've learned, you didn't quit, but there had to be some really big hurdles that you overcame. I think we prepped a little bit and talked about kids, maybe being pregnant and flying.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of those big hurdles, and how did you overcome them? And how did you make some of those decisions that we maybe most of us might have chosen to quit and you didn't quit? What's the how behind some of those?
Well, the first one I want to address is honestly in pilot training. It's a very common, place where people want to quit, but I do want to address it because that's probably where that's where the foundation of this comes from. I'm not quitting. I mean, you can quit in pilot training, but I did not want to be that person who was like, I'm done, I'm out. And a lot of people want to quit because they think if they choose to leave, then they have more control. But honestly, it looks better if you honestly wash out, because at least you gave it your all, right? And I wasn't going to be a quitter. So in pilot training, I always thought I was 3 rides away from failing out of the program. Always. Now looking back, I wasn't. I wasn't going to fail out, but it felt like it every single day. And how did I keep going? I mean, I showed up at pilot training surrounded by mostly men with engineering degrees who wanted to fly since they were 3. And I decided I wanted to fly when I was 18, when I showed up at Air Force ROTC and they said, "Do you want to be a pilot?" And I was like, "What? Yeah, let's do that. Like, that sounds awesome." I hadn't even thought of it, but I thought, yes, let's do it. And so I was really late to the game. I was a minority, if you will. And my degree was in gerontology, old people, like the social and psychological study of aging, nothing to do with aviation. But how did I keep going? Why did I not quit? Because the Air Force said that I was qualified. They picked me. They said, she's good to go. And I believed them. And so sometimes it takes belief from somewhere else to just keep going. I'm not gonna doubt myself because somebody said I can do this. In this case, it was the Air Force. Now, probably the next big hurdle was when I got pregnant the first time and I went to the flight. I was flying unmanned platforms and I went to the flight dock and I'm like, I just want to make sure I'm pregnant. And he's like, yeah, you're pregnant. And he's like, and you're grounded. I'm like, what? What am I grounded for? I'm like 3 feet off the ground on the other side of the base, flying an aircraft like from the ground that's somewhere in, Iraq or Afghanistan. He said, well, the regulations haven't caught up. We don't have any regulations for you. So we changed the regulations. We sought a waiver, like put in the paperwork, and I actually flew all the way till 36 weeks once I was cleared. And so here I am, very pregnant, fighting the war on terror, all sorts of shifts, just to show that, this can be done. And it wasn't easy, but there's so many things that are doable. And then, later I went to weapons school when my kids were 3 months old and 18 months old because my husband said, go do it. Don't turn this opportunity down. And he said, yeah, we both were like, this is going to be super hard, but we can do this and we can do it together. And then, I'm working on my master's with 3 kids and a full-time job. And we can do hard things. It's a matter of framing it. Do you think you can? And then on top of it, are you one of those kind of people who is always looking for the rest? Like, where can I rest? Where can I get a break? And that's important. But in my humble opinion, we can weave those things into our regular day. Like, I get my mental rest and peace, like, in moments throughout the day, like when I'm driving in the car. Like, why don't I just use this time to chill? When I'm getting ready in the morning, instead of being like, oh my God, I got to anxiously get to the next thing, or oh my gosh, I got to get ready super fast and get out the door. Like, I find those moments throughout the day where I can do a ton of things and kind of mentally reset and be able to accomplish a lot. We can do a lot.
Yeah, I had a mentor many years ago when I worked at Microsoft, and he was a pretty big deal at Microsoft in those days. I wanted to be a big deal at Microsoft in those days. And he said, work-life balance is a choice. I know none of you young people want to hear that, but it's a choice. And if you want to be an executive one day, you're not going to have the same work-life balance that you probably want to have. You're not going to get 5 days a week off and then run the company named Microsoft. And I always thought that was both bullish and also very telling that, it's not necessarily what we all want in the short term. It's what we want in the long term. And I think delayed gratification is part of that. And we can accomplish so much if we put our minds to it. Some of us, including me, sometimes lose track of how do we put our minds to it and how do we overcome that stuff. And I think that's a little bit of what I've read about your courses and your performance training. So let's jump into that. We've learned about the how. We've learned about some of the other things that you've accomplished in your aviation career. But what is the course, and who could benefit from the course, and what makes the course valuable? Obviously, Holly turned us on to you and the conversation. She got a lot from it, and she's just, I believe, a private or instrument-rated pilot. What do you want the people out there listening to Behind the Prop all over the world to learn about your course and what they could benefit from it?
Well, I really want people to know that if they have not done mental performance training, specifically with aviation, whether it's my course, or they just go find a sport and performance psychology book and apply the techniques, then they're not performing at their absolute best. And I think all pilots should want to perform at their absolute best, not only for their safety, but the safety of others. I think it's really important. The program is literally a level up. So you could be struggling and they can help you, or you can be really a great performer and it just make you that much better. And it's really all about self-awareness, because so much of what we do and how we perform, it starts between our ears, which sounds very basic. But like the course starts with, what are you thinking about all day long? Like people, honestly, a lot of people have zero clue where their mind goes all day long. And that's a conversation that happens inside your head all day long. Whatever you're saying to yourself, just picture someone walking next to you saying that all day long. I mean, you're listening to it, you're saying it means you're kind of hearing it twice, right? And is it helpful or is it hurtful? Because that really affects our subconscious. And that ultimately affects our performance. And we don't always understand why we're not performing. And if you're wondering why you're not performing or how you can perform better, you've done all the studying, you're just not getting better. Sometimes studying is not the answer. And I'm not saying don't study, but if you go study and then you don't do as well as you want to, and then you just go study more, you might actually be increasing your anxiety, which might actually increase the problem. Because again, we need to have access to that content that you're putting in your mind, and you want to have access to it in a way where you're calm and focused. Because as we all know, in aviation, things don't always go as planned. I've had several different emergencies, and you have to be able to manage it in a way that gives you access to whatever it is you need to help you with that emergency. You can't just freak out, but you can train your mind. You can train that in advance to not spin out.
I'm probably going to butcher it, but there's some saying that something like you're only going to be your best on your worst day as you were your best on your best day when you were trying to perform, right? There's a big piece of that I'm sure Wally experiences more than I do on a daily basis, but there's a level of anxiety that comes in, and normally it's not the book work, right? So, Wally, we've talked about this a lot, but what would be your guidance to applicants as they're preparing to go to a check ride, and it's noon the day before, and they've already accepted the check ride, they're prepared, they know the maintenance records are there, they're going to meet you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. What should that student do?
Probably go to a movie or something like that.
I
Try to
like it.
relax.
Mhm.
Really, really try to relax, because at that point, I went through training on another airplane last week, did my check ride last Thursday, and,
Wait a
um,
second, Wally did a check ride?
I
Now
did.
now be honest, did you go watch a movie?
No, I didn't. I studied, so I didn't even take my own advice.
So it's not do what
But
I
Common.
say, it's not do what I do, but do what I say. I like it, I
But
like
I
it.
will say this, my check ride started at noon. The next day, I got up and I started to open up the books, and I said, "You know what? Hey, if I don't know it by now, I'm not gonna learn it the next 3 hours." So I did
Amen.
kind of, enjoy my coffee that morning. But, I think I mentioned this, at some point. I mean, many, many, many years ago when the movie Forrest Gump came out, um I was a 727 instructor. I think that was somewhere in the '90s or something like that. I used to I used to get students and they would kinda hit a wall. This was the 727 second officers back in the day, and the students would hit a wall, and they would all hit this wall at about the same time, and it was they were studying, 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 reading, reading, studying, and the homework I would given to them was, "Hey, go back to your hotel." The hotel that they were staying at was close to a local mall here in Houston. I'd say, "I want you to go across the street to the movie. I want you to watch Forrest Gump tonight and come back tomorrow." And, they would come back and it would be like a new light came on. So, I don't know what happened, but, um, sometimes you gotta get away. Sometimes you just gotta get away from the stuff, because it begins to clog things up, you know? It's like clogging up. You put too much stuff down your garbage disposal, and it's going to quit working.
Yeah, you need
Well, I think that
access
goes
to
back
that
to Tammy's
content.
example of the two doors, right? Like, Tammy, tell us, like, where do we all miss the boat on that stuff? Like, everyone's still studying. Anyone who has a check ride tomorrow morning, anywhere in the world, they're reading something, trying to memorize one more cloud triangle to make sure they know the minimums for everything. Like, how do they crack the surface and break through it to open more doors? Is there some secret sauce that don't give away your course, but give us a give us a nugget?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give you what I can. The thing about this content is, like I said, I give you one technique and you're like, "That's it?" Oh, I'm not. But they're layered, and then you can choose the things that work best for you. So I will offer some stuff up. But one of the biggest problems that a lot of people have is not being in the moment, right? So what happens is people, they make a mistake and they're going, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that." And they're looking backwards thinking, "Oh," and replaying it and what could I have done different? And now is not the time to be doing that because your plane is still flying forward, hopefully, and you need to be in that moment. The other thing they're doing is they're projecting forward going, "What if I do that again? What if this other thing happens? What if, and we're what ifing." Now we all know that planning for contingencies or what ifs is a good thing. But in this case, what I'm talking about is not a good thing. You need to be in the moment. You don't need to be like spinning out about what could happen when you're flying an aircraft, right? So you need to be in the moment. So I have a much more advanced technique on how to you practice it on the ground so you have access in the air and people love it. It's called the recage technique. So if you're an older pilot who's actually flown with non-glass attitude indicators, you'd recage them, right? Anyways, it's like a reset technique, but the quickest way I can teach you without teaching that, because it's like a whole module, is to say the words to yourself, "What now? What now?" Because it brings your brain to the actual moment. And it's very simple, but it's very powerful to bring your brain back to the moment because that's usually what's happening. You're usually forward or you're backward. The other thing is that pilots often are always they're looking at the top of the mountain. They're looking at that goal. And that is an outcome-based goal, right? So we all have outcome-based goals, and we're usually just going after that thing, and we'll hit marks along the way, but we just kind of pass them quickly and go on, but I'm going there. And a lot of times we're comparing ourselves at going, "Well, I'm just a private pilot. I just soloed. instead of being like celebrating what we did. So what am I getting at? A couple things. First of all, yeah, set that outcome-based goal, but then start looking closer to yourself. Like, what's next? What's the next thing I'm doing? And when you hit that next mark, celebrate it. It doesn't have to be a party. This has to be like, "Hey, good job, me. Like, I'm flying a plane. Most people in the world never fly planes." You would be surprised at how these tiny little give myself accolades. I'm not saying be arrogant. I'm saying celebrate yourself, even if it's just internally or writing it down in a notebook saying, "Hey, I did this today. It was awesome." It's really, really good for building your confidence. And you have to build your confidence. This is grow on its own. It doesn't just grow because you have more hours. You actually have to build it. Now, the other quick thing I think that people love to hear that's related to this is the process-based goal. So a lot of us have that outcome-based goal, but we need process-based goals too. So I like to use my cross-country running daughter to give this example. Let's say she wants to break 20 minutes on her 5K, and that's the only goal she sets. She hits the end of the season and she doesn't make it. Is she a failure? She's not a failure, right? But she's going to feel like one if that's the only goal she set. So what we do along the path is we pick out things that are the process to getting her there. So for example, for a week, we'll make a little chart that says every day that has a box that says, okay, I slept for 8 hours. I ate lunch, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I had 2 snacks. I went to my workout. I had a good attitude at my workout. I praised 3 of my teammates. I visualized my race 3 times, and all these things that she can check the box that she did. And she doesn't necessarily do them all the time, but as she goes, she checks all these off. So that if she were to fail at the goal, she doesn't look back. She has something to fall back on and say, "Hey, I did the work. Let me go after this again. I can do this." And flying has the same thing. Like, I want to, I'm going to study 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. If I get weathered out, I'm going to go talk to, pilots around here for 20 minutes and hear their best stories of aviation, their biggest tips. I'm going to chair fly, twice a week. I'm going to debrief myself with my thing I did well and thing I didn't do well and a question I have, etc. Like you can create process-based goals along the way. So if that thing doesn't, because we don't always pass check rides, like it happens. It's not the end of the world. Like we want to pass, right? But there you go. Couple tips.
Yeah, I think our next show is actually about overcoming a disapproval that we recorded a while back, but we've been holding it in the can. And I think it is one of those things where many, many professional pilots, many, many military aviators, many, many family pilots have failed a check ride, and they are extremely safe, right? That is not the determination that you're not a good pilot. It's a
Correct.
determination that maybe you made a mistake on a day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
golly, we've all made a mistake on an A day.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that I keep hearing you say over and over, and I just want to tell my listeners and any of my employees and anyone who's listening that this is not necessarily just about flying. It's about teaching. Like you embody what you're saying. Everything you're saying is teaching people. And I wish all my flight instructors, and I know Wally wishes every flight instructor would focus more on the teaching aspect and less about the flying. It's not about 60 hours, 50 hours, 30 hours. It's about teaching the fundamentals of making good pilots and building upon that and having those checklists like a cross country runner would, that if I do these things, I've got to be getting better at my skill. The skill is less about the outcome than the work that you do every step of the way to get to that outcome. And I'm sure your course shares a lot of that with your students as well. So I love it. How about a few questions that I'm just curious about how a performance coach would maybe answer some of these things? So, in this aviation focus, what's the
Okay.
most common mistake you see that pilots make evaluating themselves?
Oh, well, they define themselves by the error. They don't use it as information. Like I had two pilots share the story about a prop strike. I'm not a prop strike, a tail strike. Sorry. One pilot essentially was like, I shouldn't even be a pilot. I can't believe I did this, like beating themselves up. The other one literally said, well, I had this prop strike, but I learned that when I do X, Y happens. So I don't do X anymore. So you had the first pilot defining themselves by this simple error and going, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be doing this. And having that dialogue in there, back to the dialogue in your own head, right? Like that matters. And then the other pilot who was like, oh, whoops, I learned this and I'm not going to do it again. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, I meet a lot of people. Wally and I have a common acquaintance that if she's listening, she'll know who she is probably, but probably beats herself up, says she's never ready, not that good. Wally did her instrument check ride 6 to 9 months ago and said something to the effect afterwards that she might be a better instrument instructor than some of my other instructors. Just the
She's a
pure
perfectionist.
skill that she contains, but she can't see it at all, like, doesn't even feel it, and luckily for us and our student base, she's an instructor now, and probably will be one of the best, but what's your guidance to someone like that who has that, and I'm a perfectionist, so I get it,
Yeah.
that I have this layer of it's never good enough. If
Right.
I think I'm at 100%, I feel like I gotta get to 120%, right? Nothing's ever good enough, so what would be your performance coaching to someone like that who has all the knowledge, can perform, and doesn't ever accept the goodness that they can give to the aviation community?
Yeah. Well, one of the sayings I like to share is strive for perfection, but don't be a perfectionist. Now, what that means is I don't want you to lower your standards to less than perfection because you know you're not going to be perfect because it's impossible. Like, okay, so I'm not going to shoot for it. That's dumb. But know on the backside that something's not going to be perfect, and you use that as information. Again, you're not going to define yourself out. You're going to go, well, I'm shooting for the moon. I'm going to probably come up short, but that's cool because this is going to be where I learn. I'll be honest with you, and I was in the fighter world, if I didn't get a debrief, if I didn't get to learn what I did wrong, I felt shorted
Mm.
because I can't get any better if I'm not being told, like if they say, hey, that was a good flight. See y'all later. We're not going to debrief today. It sounds great because we can go have lunch, right? But hey, I just not wasted, but there's an hour, 10 minutes up there that I learned something, but I don't know what it is because I need your feedback. But the other thing
Yeah.
I want to share is that what you look for is really important. So for example, if I show you a picture that has a bunch of, items on it and they're all different colors and I tell you to pick out all the yellow ones, and then I take the picture away and I tell you to tell me which red ones were on there, you'd be like, "Wait, I was looking at yellow."
Mm.
Because that's a filtration system, right? Well, our brain uses that same filtration system based on what you believe. So if I say to myself, I'm a bad pilot, I can't land, my brain is all day looking for data to validate that because it has to filter, and that's what it's using as a filtration system because it can't take in everything. So it's going to go, well, I believe I'm bad at landing, so that's bad. All these things say I'm bad at landing. So that's why it's so important what you think. And it sounds like with this young woman, she is such an awesome pilot that it doesn't matter that she doesn't think she's that good. Can you imagine how amazing she would be if she actually believed it?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, she sounds like she's incredible. I want her to know that.
I'll remind her of that tomorrow.
Yeah.
For sure. So, one last big question, then maybe a little rapid fire before we wrap it completely up. If you could change one thing about flight training culture, whether it's at United Flight Systems, in the military, at the airlines, what's the one thing you would change about flight training culture?
Well, I can only speak intelligently to the military culture when I was there, which is even maybe different now. And I can base it on what I hear other people saying. But what I would change is that I would I do two things. First of all, the student is the center, right? I believe that an instructor should modify the way they instruct based on the needs of the student. And I don't think that a student should have to modify how they learn based on how an instructor teaches. That comes with experience. I get it, but that's the goal, right? The student is the center, and they're the mystery that they're the detective trying to solve. And the other thing I would put out there is that what the student is thinking matters. It truly matters. So I came back, I debriefed a student once, and essentially I discovered as I was watching him and paying attention to what was going on, he was having massive confidence issues. I could see that he could fly, but he didn't believe it. I could have come back and in the debrief said, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did this wrong. Fix it this way. This is how you fix this. It wouldn't have helped him at all. Instead, what did I do? I sat him down, I looked him right in the eye and I said, how are you doing? And he was like, what? Like he froze. Nobody asked me how I'm doing here at pilot training. He didn't answer me. And finally, I just said, here's the deal. I'm picking up feelings of defeat because I was reading him, like caring about who he was as a person, not just his grade book. I could see his grade book was fine, but his grade book's not flying. He's flying. So I had to pay attention to him. So I think it's so important that we pay attention to the student. And what he said to me was, yeah, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I didn't have any trouble landing the T6, but I can't land the T-38. Instantly, I was so relieved because that's a simple problem. The T-38 is really, really hard to land. And I just told him that. I said, it's got tiny little wings, tiny little gear, lands really fast. Just give yourself time. I haven't seen anything that you did today or that's in your gradebook that tells me you can't do this by the time you need to do it. But if you're not looking for the root cause of the problem and you're just looking for surface, like this is the surface result, you're not being as effective as an instructor for your students.
And I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up some of the conversation. We had a past Blue Angel on the show, call sign Intake, and he had all kinds of stories about debriefing and having conversations. And it was always about, if I'm debriefing you, I'm telling you all this stuff because I think you can get better. Like I want you to get better. And I think we all take it as a personal attack, right? Like in most cases. But your open candidness of how are you doing is one of those things where you want to get the information from that person so that you can help them be successful.
Right.
We have a team at Flight Systems called Student Success. Like we want everyone to achieve success. Wally, if you could ever get to this point, wouldn't you love to be a DP that had 100% pass rate?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you come in on Saturday morning, even if you've had a bad night, a bad day, a terrible cup of coffee, are you like, I'm gonna fail this person?
No. No.
No. I mean, everyone has to understand. Although I think we wake up and go, I'm going to fail. And as you said, Tammy, our brain starts to look for reasons why failing is going to be okay. And we shouldn't let that be the case. I think we could all use a little bit of that performance training, a little bit of that a little bit of that thing that female instructor, now instructor, needs to believe in herself more than we do to take it and share it with her students and make them the best pilots in the world. Tammy, anything you'd like to share with our listeners all around the world before we wrap up tonight?
Yeah, I think there's two things I'd like to share. So when we think about pilots, synonymously, we think confidence, right? Pilot confidence. And that makes sense. But what happens in life when you either have something that happens in flying, or maybe life itself is overwhelming and your confidence starts to dip? People think, instead of like realizing they can fix the confidence because there's ways to fix it and ways to work on confidence and build confidence, they start to feel like they're not a pilot anymore, or they're not as good of a pilot anymore. Instead of bringing their confidence up, they kind of bring the belief in themselves down, which can happen to people who have been in aviation for a long time. In fact, a lot of people who are confident through their entire career, if they hit something that suddenly is like shakes their confidence, it's very scary. They're like, I've never felt this before. I don't know what to do about it. But it's fixable. I just want people to know that. And the last thing I want to say is, you're going into that check ride, you're going into that flight. Instead of going, oh my gosh, what am I going to screw up today? The dialogue inside your head. Self-awareness is a superpower. You got to pay attention to what's going on inside your own head. But instead of saying those things, flip the script and go into it saying, let's see how great I can do this. And it'll make a huge difference.
That's awesome. Great guidance to our listeners. If you're out there and you have anything coming up or think you could benefit, check out the show notes. We'll put a bunch of links to find out more information about Tammy, more information about her courses and all of her performance training. If you enjoy the show, give us 5 stars if we earned it. As always, fly safely and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.